Hi, and thank you for joining us at Tax Talk UK, where we talk about all things tax and consider other important aspects of working for yourself, being self-employed, running a small business. So today we're going to talk about the comparison between an hourly rate of an employed person versus a self-employed person doing the same role. Before we talk about that, if I could please ask you to take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you can quickly refer back to this information if you need to, as well as being able to access other information that we have on a whole wide range of topics, all aimed at supporting you in your self-employment. If you could also take the time for any of the videos that you watch that you find the information useful, to like the videos, because this helps us to form a better idea of which questions we should prioritise, which topics, and which information is the most helpful to the most people. So thank you for that. So back then to hourly rate comparison. So this was on the back of one of our videos when we talked about how much to charge if you are self-employed, and how much to, how to determine that. Now, of course, not everything is going to be, you're not going to necessarily be charging for your time on an hourly rate. Even if you provide a service, you may charge fixed value fees, and that's of course a different topic. But what we were asked was, if you earn a certain amount and a certain hourly rate as an employed person, should you be charging that same hourly rate if you are self-employed? And the answer, of course, is no, absolutely not. So whether you were salaried and received an annual salary or a monthly salary, of course, you will have a set amount of hours to do in that time as an employee. So it's easy to work out roughly what your hourly rate is as an employed person. But the thing to think about is, if you're employed, then for a start, your employer is paying things such as insurance. They're paying likely for the equipment that you might need, for any expert consultations that you need. So they're actually providing everything, but that also means that they're incurring that cost. So you simply, in your employer's business, become a cost of that business. So that's something to consider, that if you are self-employed, you have to pay all of those costs yourself. So you no longer have everything provided. You now have to pay for your own insurance, for your own communications, such as your telephones, your internet, any sort of office equipment that you need to pay for that now. So if you charge the same hourly rate as you receive as an employed person, you're obviously going to be automatically worse off, because out of that money you've now got to pay all these costs which previously you didn't have to pay. So then the next thing to consider is that as an employed person, you receive holiday, sick pay, all of those sorts of things that you no longer receive now. So as a self-employed person, you only get paid when you're working, depending obviously on your business model, but you no longer get paid for the time when you're on holiday, for example. So you need to factor all of this in when you're sort of determining, because if you took your annual salary, for example, and you'd worked that down to your hourly rate, and then you charge that as a self-employed person without taking into account the costs that we just talked about, then you're only going to earn that hourly rate when you're working, again, depending on your industry, depending on whether you're service or production, but still the sort of the thinking is still the same, that you're not getting paid when you're on holiday. No one's paying your wage still for that time in the same way as when you're employed. So another factor to think about is at quiet times, if you're employed and you're receiving a salary, you get paid regardless if you don't have, if you're not that busy in your employment. Well, of course, that could have a knock-on effect and you know, sort of result in other things such as redundancy, your job being taken away. But ultimately, when you are employed, if they don't have very much work to do in a day, you're still going to get paid the same amount. But that's not the same if you're self-employed. So you need to sort of factor in that you need to that the amount that you need to be aiming to earn, and the fact that at quieter times or busy times, you know, you're going to not get paid the same amount in the same way as if you were employed. Another thing to think about is the risk element. So for example, if one of your customers or your clients doesn't pay, again, when you're employed, if the customer doesn't pay your company, it's your company that stands the loss for that. You still get paid regardless. So there's no risk to you if you're obviously, again, there might be implications for some of these things. If, you know, if all of your customers keep not paying, then obviously that could reflect on the quality of the job that you're doing, and that could have other implications. But the principle is still the same, that it's your employer is the one that's taking the risk. So you would expect, as a self-employed person, to be commanding a higher hourly rate than your equivalent employed person for those and sort of many other reasons. And again, as I talked about, it's not everything will be determined by hourly rate, but that specifically was the question that we were asked. So we wanted to give some of the things to consider as to why you wouldn't just, if you were just doing something as an employed person and you wanted to go self-employed doing that same thing, that you wouldn't just simply think, right, well, that's fine, I'm just going to earn the same amount of money, because the things that we've just talked about, you would need to factor in to make sure that you actually end up with the same amount in your pocket after tax that you would do as an employed person. So just on that sort of basic comparison, you need to take into account those considerations. And of course, I should just mention, if you are I'm not talking about for your employer, so I'm not saying if you're employed by someone becoming self-employed but only working for your for the one person, because there's rules against doing that. I'm talking about somebody who is doing a job in an employed role, who wants to actually go out, leave their job and go out and gain their own customers, their own clients, and do that legitimately as a self-employed role. So those are the things that we're talking about. And again, we've talked about it in other videos, but there's lots more to consider when you're deciding what to charge. But that, hopefully that answers the question of, you know, how your hourly rate should compare with if you was employed in the same role. So thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.